It's been an adventure. Been here 6 years now. There are 7 continents in the world, and I have been to 6 of them, lived on 4 of them. So it's been a unique kind of expat life. I left the United States in 2017, and I've been a little bit of everywhere from Europe to Asia to Africa and survived COVID, which was unique in itself. That's a book in itself. So, but now, yeah, just living day to day in China and living in real China. And what I mean by that is you live in places and you can survive without learning the language. For instance, a Chinese person could live in America, could live in New York City, could live in Philadelphia, could live in Washington, D.C., San Francisco, Seattle, and live within a particular Chinatown and never have to learn a word of English because they live within their particular enclave. Well, you can do some of that same thing here in China. If you are a expat, you live in places like Shanghai or Beijing, there's enough of an expat community and there's enough English speaking Chinese where you may not have to learn a lot of Chinese. But if you live in one of the smaller cities, you're going to have to learn some Chinese here. And that's what I mean, the difference between living in China than living in what I call real China. And that's where I live. I live in real China. How real is real China? You can't even get a fork in this town. You have to eat with chopsticks or starve. So that's the difference. And nobody speaks English here. So if you're going to live here and not be miserable, you're going to have to learn Chinese, and that's just the way it is. So, but luckily for me, I've learned Chinese. So my day to day is functional, and I've been able to do the things I do now. Just for the record, I'm teaching English here. And I've been teaching English here for about 6 years now. So that's how I, get my beer and pizza money is teaching English. And what I can tell you is that China is nothing like you've been told in the West, in America and Europe about what China is. It's a progressive country. It's a beautiful country. I think the greatest food in the world. And that's to say something considering I've been around the world. So and I think I know many different parts of China. Now, what I mean by that is, I have visited in my time here over 60 different cities across the whole country, from Tibet to Siberia in China, up by the Russian border, to the islands of China, what they call China's Hawaii. So I've been to the south, I've been to the north, I've been to the west, and I've seen many different parts of China. And it is just a unique country with wonderful, wonderful people and safe. As a Black American, I have experienced no racism here. Now, that doesn't mean that China is perfect and that I don't have problems, but it does mean that the problems I have ain't because of the color of my skin. So I can accept that. They have, for the most part, eradicated poverty. There's no homeless. Cops don't carry guns, so there's no gun violence. There hasn't been. I live in a city, when I say small city, I live in a city of 5 million people. Now in America, this city, my city is Taizhou in Jiangsu province, would be the second largest city in America. But in China, it's a small city. Just to give you some scale of numbers, Shanghai is 26 million, Beijing is 20 million. There's another 20 million in places like Chongqing, Guangzhou, Shenzhen. So there are many, many countries. And again, just to give you some metrics, America has 10 cities with over 1 million people in it. China has 150 cities with more than 1 million people in it. So that gives you the scale of 1 billion people versus 300 million people. But somehow it is functional, it is safe, it is clean. The exchange rate is about 7 Chinese yuan or Chinese dollars to 1 US dollar. But that said, a dollar in China spends the same way a dollar in America spends. So they don't necessarily take into account foreign exchange requirements when they're actually living day to day. And I can tell you that it is also really easier, much easier to travel around the world from China. Don't know why, but it is, and cheaper. China on the whole has a different kind of economy. And what I mean by that is, in America, if you make $100,000, you're going to spend 98 of it just living day to day. In China, if you make $3,000 a month, you may spend $500 a month. So the expenses of day-to-day living versus your salary is extremely different. It's extremely different and quite affordable. Quite affordable. Now, I've seen so many different comments about China, negative mostly from the West, about how bad it is, and they surveil their people. It's a dictatorship, one of my favorites, and they're oppressing their people. But do I look oppressed? Yeah, and I can tell you day to day that I'm actually very happy here. So, and it's been a kind of unique experience, versus other places I've lived. Now I used to live in Rome before I came to China. So I came to China from Rome, which was a unique experience in itself. Rome was fantastic. Great people. I was actually an illegal immigrant in Rome, ironically enough. But which gets me back to immigration, but we'll get on that later. But Rome was great, Italy was great, Europe was great, and I had an opportunity to come to China to teach. I was teaching English in Rome and writing books. So I had an opportunity to come to China and teach, and I took it. So it allowed me to come here and learn about the Chinese culture, learn about the people, learn about the food. The different ways that foreigners are treated versus how they treat the locals. There's always, in the beginning, there always is a foreigner price to pay for everything because they know you don't know. They just know you don't know. So, but it was like that in Rome. Me and my daughter went to visit Kenya in Africa in 2020, right before, I mean, literally like a week before COVID broke out. And they called me from China and said, the COVID is bad here, don't come back. And I'm like, but all my stuff is there. So I'm sitting there in Africa with a backpack, and they said, don't come back, because they thought the scare of COVID was that bad. So I ended up living in Mombasa, Kenya for 6 months, and doing some teaching there at an orphanage while I was there and writing at the same time. But it worked out, and I had a chance to come back, and they figured it out. Now, that said, between 2020 and the end of 2022, we spent months on lockdown, months. I mean, I think in 2022 of the 12 months, we must have did 6 or 8 of them. I lost count now that we're in December 2023, but we must have done 6 or 8 of those months on lockdown. And in China, no, this is in China. I came back to China after Africa, but we did in 2022, we did 6 to 8 months of lockdown. And in China, they got real lockdown, where they close off the city. They put off ramps on the highway. They blocked the off ramps on the highway. No buses in, no trains out, no nothing. And you sit on lockdown, and you literally sit at home. So the lockdown was real here. But 2023 came, and they lifted the lockdown, and whatever somebody's version of normal is, we're back to it. And it's good to be able to get out, So for me, that meant the opportunity to travel again. And what was unique about this year of 2023 was I think I took it over the top with the travel, with a little bit of everywhere. 2023 for me was highlighted by me and my daughter actually going to Tanzania and climbing Mount Kilimanjaro, which is, Now, so Mount Kilimanjaro is the tallest mountain in Africa. It is the highest freestanding mountain in the world. Freestanding meaning the difference from freestanding versus a range of mountains. Everest is a mountain range. The Himalayas are a mountain range. The Rockies are a mountain range. Kilimanjaro is a mountain freestanding, not attached to another mountain. So that's why they call it the highest freestanding mountain in the world. So it was an accomplishment to be able to do that and reach the summit, which is not easy. Unbeknownst to us, me and my daughter ended up walking, trekking, mountaineering the toughest route. There are several routes to climb Kilimanjaro. We ended up tracking the toughest route in the shortest amount of time. Unbeknownst to, and I'm glad that I had that ignorance, because if I knew what I knew now, I wouldn't have did it. 5 days. So we did. So it's just under 19,000 feet at the summit, and we did it over 5 days. Now maybe you'll meet somebody that's climbed Kilimanjaro over time. You'll meet very few people that have climbed Mount Kilimanjaro in 5 days over that route, even if they have climbed it successfully and reached the summit. So we know that we accomplished something, and it was unique in its own right. In February, that was August and September. In February, I actually went to Kathmandu in Nepal and did some zip lining through the Himalayas. So that was unique. It was unique for me because I got to see the Himalayas in Asia from the Tibet side and the Nepal side. So those are some of the unique kinds of travels that I got to do and see. Same thing with Africa. After we finished Kilimanjaro, we went on safari in the Serengeti, and I got to see the Great Rift Valley. So that means that I got to see the Great Rift Valley in Africa from the Kenya side and the Tanzania side, which was also really, really neat. So, when you talk about travel and world travel and some things you want to see, there's a lot to see. There's a lot to see. And my sister Cindy always says to keep it moving. So that's what I've been doing. And I got to also go to, in February, that was May, so February, I also went to Harbin. Now, you wouldn't know Harbin. Many people in the West wouldn't know Harbin. But Harbin is a city in northern China, close to the Russian border. And up there, they have what they call the world's largest ice festival. So they literally build a city out of ice. And it is an amazing adventure to see if you ever get the chance. Cold. Cold is the word. So, and I'm talking about highs of minus 15, that kind of cold. It's a unique place, but beautiful, beautiful. And it's ironic too, when you talk about just traveling and going places, people up there, you talk about bilingual, you'll meet many people in the States. Some might speak Spanish and English. Some might speak French and English. But up there, when you talk about bilingual, it's French and Chinese. Russian and Chinese. Yeah, so that's a whole different set of bilingual to get your mind around. Understanding that you might be talking to a person, if they speak some kind of English, then that makes them trilingual because they speak a little bit of English, they speak some Russian, and they speak Chinese. So it was neat to be able to experience that. And then this year, I also got to see Mongolia. I tell you, I've been to a lot of places around the world. I've been to Greece, Australia, New Zealand, South America, all over Europe, all over. I've been to every state in the US. Mongolia is a neat, neat place. Great people, great food, got to ride horses, great history, great museums. I was just surprised at how good and how much fun Mongolia was. So I hope to make another trip back there at some point in life. But, when you talk about travel, there's so many places to see around the world. And I know you've done some traveling too. And I know you've been around and been getting out there and seeing things. So, I want you to tell me a little bit about that as well. But as far as my turn to talk, yeah, I have, and I have a couple of different missions. One is to continue writing. I write nonfiction books. So I've published 5 books so far in my lifetime, 4 in English and 1 in Chinese. I'm currently writing another book. I'm writing a book about Alexander Dumas and his family in French. And I'm writing my second book in Chinese about China's Christopher Columbus, a guy named Zheng He. And he was an explorer about 100 years before Columbus. So I'm writing that book as well in Chinese. And when I tell you I'm writing books in Chinese, I write them on Chinese scrolls in gold ink by hand. So it's a unique opportunity for me to, not only know Chinese, but learn Chinese and keep writing Chinese and stay fresh in Chinese by writing these books. But that's what writers do. So, at the end of the day, my search when it comes to writing is looking for good material and writing about, I like writing nonfiction because I don't think I can do nonfiction, but I never tried it. But I love writing about history. I'm a child of my mother. She was a history woman, and she left that legacy with me to be able to write history books. So I'm proud of that. And you can find a lot of my books on Amazon for anybody who wants to look. But this has been a unique journey. And to be able to do things, like I said, I'm going to go back to Kilimanjaro because I climbed Kilimanjaro at 59. So the other lesson here is it's never too late. No matter what you think, it is never too late. And for those people that might actually get to watch this podcast, if you are thinking about doing these kinds of things, you are right on time. You are right on time for wherever you think you want to do. So everything you've gotten past it or your window is closed, it has not on anything. So I will finish out the work I have to do here in China. I teach between literally sometimes 3 and 4-year-olds up to high schoolers. And it depends on the classroom schedules and the rates. But it is rewarding to be able to talk to these children every day and sit down with them, exchange ideas. They all have their own unique ways about learning English. And I tell you, the Chinese children are really smart. Now, many people would also say, again, when you talk about stereotypes, oh, the Chinese are much smarter than American children. I don't know about that. But what I do know, they go to school every day over here. So if you're going to do something every day, you're going to be good at it. So, I don't know if they're smarter than anybody else, but I do know they do it a lot. And that's what you're going to get good at when you do something every day. So it's a long schedule, but it's a good schedule. And I like the work that I'm doing. I like the mixture of working and teaching English, interacting with these children, traveling and writing. And at this point in my life, that's fine with me. That's just fine with me. So, we all make our choices about how we do things in our lives, but that has been a fulfilling prospect for me in terms of what we do every day and why we do it. What we do every day and why we do it. So I'm glad that I could get on your podcast. It's ironic because in America, you've been told that China is your enemy. They're coming to get you. They're stealing your jobs and all these things. The Chinese have no clue what you're talking about. Matter of fact, most people in China love America. Matter of fact, second matter of fact, the Chinese word for America? It's Meiguo, Meiguo, and it means beautiful people, beautiful country. So that is the Chinese idea of how they see America. While you're being told to hate America and China's this awful country that's out to dominate the world, I don't see that day to day. I really don't. And the people that I know in China and the places that I've been, they have always treated me with great respect. And I consider it an honor to be a guest of the Chinese people for as long as they've had me. So every day I'm grateful to be here, and I love China. I absolutely love it. But China loves America for the most part. They don't see this competition. They don't see this oh, we got to, take down America thing, like America sees China. They just don't see it like that. And it's just one of the ironies of life. Crazy. The only one I haven't been on, well, the ones I told you I've been to six of them. I've lived on four of them. So, I haven't lived in Australia. That's one. I haven't visited Antarctica, which is on the bucket list. None of these trips are cheap to do though. So, but I want to go to Antarctica and set foot there. And you know, I lived in Asia. I've lived in Africa. I've lived in Europe. I lived in North America. I have not lived in South America, and I have not lived in Antarctica, and I have not lived in Australia. But the rest off the list. And it's amazing to think that I've gotten around like that. Well, in the case of Americans, so let me also say that there's a difference between international travel and global travel. Those are two completely different things. If you're in America, you go down to Mexico or you go up to Canada, that's international travel. You go to the Bahamas, that's international travel. You go to Cayman Islands, that's international travel. But that is not global travel. Global travel, in my definition, is getting around the world. And when I say around the world, places like Asia, places like, South America, places like Australia, New Zealand. I've been to Cambodia, I've been to Thailand, I've been to Laos, I've been to Tanzania, I've been to Kenya. Yeah, for me, yeah, Cambodia is fantastic, by the way. We're going to single out a place to be. Again, another country, and again, you know, Americans and Europeans tend to measure. I hear words like terms like third world country, underdeveloped nations, poor nations. If you measure anything, a country's wealth, your personal wealth, by how much actual money you have, yeah, are there countries that have more money than other countries? Yes. But that does not mean that a country is not wealthy. Cambodia is Bill Gates wealthy in culture, in lives lived, in how people do things. Same thing with Laos, same thing with Tanzania, same thing with Kenya. Now they may not be as wealthy as the United States or the United Kingdom or Italy or China, but they are wealthy in their own right. And people need to get their minds about, one, what is wealth and what is not wealth. You know, that's a different thing. Now, the other one is too, though. Again, you asked me about how somebody should start traveling. There's caveats to that too. Traveling as a black man, traveling as a black woman is not the same as traveling as a white woman or a white man. We don't get the Travel Channel experience. It ain't like that. And I've experienced a lot of racism around the world as well. There's places that I could care less about going back to. And there are places that I want to go back to because I absolutely love them. So, you got to put into perspective what you want to see when you travel. That's another thing too, is what you want to do when you travel. For me, it's about visiting places I've never been, the history of those places, the culture, the food, and learning about them. Because maybe one day I want to write about them in my particular case. But for me, it's about going someplace and learning. Now, there's nothing to be said. There's nothing wrong with going to the beach and sitting on the beach and having, the drinks with the umbrella in it and the whole thing. There's nothing wrong with that. But for me, I want to get out and see something and do something and understand the place. Having come back and learned, at my age, which is 60, my life is about knowing how dumb I am when I wake up and wanting to learn something. So I'm learning and searching, and that's what I'll do. And it's hard to sit still. It's hard to sit still. But for travel, getting back to your question, if I was an American, yeah, I go to Canada first. Go down to Mexico, get that out the way, and then to expand that international travel, London's an easy trip. Paris is an easy trip. I probably do London just because, from a foreign American's point of view, they speak English. Which is another thing. Yeah, but if you were just getting your feet wet and you have not traveled, yeah, but there's some great places in America though. Before you even start that, New Orleans, Chicago. I love Denver, L.A., Miami. There's some great places in America. The Grand Canyon. And then another underrated trip. Many people talk about, but talk about different places to go. The Grand Canyon was a great trip. I love the Grand Canyon. So, there's places in America to see as well, but for international travel, yeah. And the other misnomer, everybody will tell you, oh, well, English is the standard language around the world. It's not. People say, I speak English, I should be okay everywhere I go. That's bullshit. If you go into Italy, the Italians speak Italian. The French speak French. And you'll meet the majority of people do not speak English. In China, they speak Chinese. That's it. They speak Chinese. In Tanzania, they speak Swahili. You're not going to you find a lot of people that speak English. Now, there are people who speak English, don't get me wrong, but it ain't like, everywhere you go, you just think you're going to be okay because you speak English. And that's a big thing to learn. Learn that you need to understand that Black people traveling internationally is not the same as white people traveling internationally. And it's just a fact, and you got to get your mind around that. And then there's other places where the travel is not easy. Some places, you can travel to Europe if you're an American. I'm speaking if you're an American. You can travel to Europe and then pretty much be able to get around without visas and extra fees and that kind of thing. The rest of the world isn't like that. China, you got to give an arm and a leg, get a visa, to when you get here, they want to know this and that. You got to get a visa to get into Cambodia. Actually, most countries outside of Europe, if you're an American. So, and that costs extra money. The other thing is time. Now, I would tell you that I think I was talking to somebody, and they're talking about they were going to take a week's vacation and go to Bali in Indonesia for a week. And I'm just kind of sitting there like, I don't know how you're going to make that possible. Flight's going to take you 2 days. So it's 2 days flying on each end. And then by the time you get there, a day to recover, you might have 2 or 3 days of actual vacation time. So if you're coming to Asia from America, you need to give yourself a minimum of 2 weeks, not 10 days, 2 weeks, because by the time you get settled and get your legs about you and then you get back, you're going to see how fast it goes, Plus, you need to keep in mind, always have a little extra money for, I'm just going to call it foreigner tax. And what I mean by that is, if you have never been to a country and you're going there for the first time, you're going to get fucked over sooner or later, somehow. Somebody going to take advantage of you. It's just the way it is. And there's no amount of planning that's going to get you out of it either. You can't just block that thing out. I checked off this box, checked off that box. You going to get taken advantage of somehow, somewhere, and there's no way around it. And the best you can do is accept that and know that. Just know that. And what you want to hope for is that when you do get taken advantage of, that you get it out the way as quickly as possible. So you can be about the learning. But that's the other thing about global travel versus international travel, I think, is just understanding the little nuances, And the other one I always try to make sure people understand is how you pack. Now, no matter whether I'm going away for a week or 6 months, I will never travel with nothing more than a backpack. If it can't fit in a backpack, I really don't need to have it. And you got to learn how to travel light, not checking bags and having 4 or 5 suitcases. It's just going to be cumbersome, especially if you're going to be going to different places in different cities or moving around the city, wherever you are, whatever country you're in. You want to be as mobile as you can be. So my other big thing is to travel light. And I mean light. Like, when I say backpack, I won't carry a backpack that I can't fit underneath my seat, no matter where I go. But that allows me to move. That allows me to move and be able to see things. And I can walk out the door, and every time I walk out of the hotel room, I can take my whole bag with me. So if something goes down, I know I got everything with me. It's no big deal. So that's a big, big thing that I think a lot of people don't quite understand about travel. Whether it's domestic travel or international travel or global travel, how you pack, and you need to go light. You need to go light. So keep that in mind as well. I got about 10 minutes. Yeah. Oh, I'm in and out of about 25 different languages, from Chinese to Russian to Greek, the Portuguese, the Basque, Arabic, Spanish, Italian, French, Dutch, Norwegian. So a little bit of everything. Although I will tell you, I spend most of my time these days Chinese, just because it's around me. Whether it's walking out the door to go to the mall or go to the park, or at the school. The only time I really speak English is in the school, but it's heavy Chinese here. So when you talk about languages, there's five things to keep in mind. You want to be able to speak a language. You want to be able to read a language. You want to be able to understand a language. You want to be able to comprehend that language. And you also want to be fluent. And what do I mean by that? You want to be able to type in text in that language. And that's gonna give you some kind of competency about a language. And so for me, I spend my day typing in Chinese, writing in Chinese, speaking in Chinese. Even in the classroom, sometimes I have to speak Chinese so the children can understand what I'm teaching them in English. So these days I spend most of my time speaking Chinese. But I still speak Italian every now and then, French, Swahili, when necessary. So, but mostly English and Chinese. Although I have to remind myself sometimes about English because I'm just. What's the second language I learned? I want to say it was Italian. It was Italian. From my days in Italy. You just, like you say, when you're in a country, you need to learn that country's language. And again, and that's the other thing too. Just quickly, it's one thing visiting a country. It is a completely different thing living in a country. Living in a country, visiting a country, those are two different dynamics. So, at some point or another, you're going to have to learn that country's language if you are living there, because you got to do the little things, going to the supermarket, going to the park, asking directions on public transportation. Those are everyday things that you're just not going to be able to get by if you don't speak the language of whatever country you're in. So these are the little things to get by too. I mean, although I think when you travel to a country, whether you're visiting or you're moving overseas, you should learn a little bit of the language itself to cut down on that getting taken advantage of factor. It's out there. It's out there. So I'd also recommend that. If nothing else, whatever country you're going to, learn how to say this and that in that country's language. Because you can always point to something and say this or that, and that's 90% of the interactions that you might even have to give a visit to a country. So my recommendation would be to learn this and that of that particular language in that particular country if you're traveling. Forget about everything else. If you got this and that, at least you'll be able to get by. Yep. All right, man. I'm glad to join you on this podcast. We finally figured it out. Yeah. So I don't know. Do you post these on YouTube or whatever you do? I want to see a copy of our interview. Cool, my man. All right. Well, let's do it time. All right, brother. I'll talk to you soon. Peace.